Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Garibaldi Red podcast, a Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm Max Sayes, your host, and there's nothing much to talk about at the moment, apart from the odd transfer bit of speculation and bits and pieces surrounding Forest. We thought, why not? Let's do a bit of a Q&A, a question and answer style podcast. We put a call out on Twitter for your questions, or X as it's now known, and also you can ask them live, as we are live on Facebook, Nottingham Forest News, and YouTube, Garibaldi Red. So be sure to get your questions into us this afternoon, as it's just gone 12 o'clock. Joined today by Elliot Stockdale, commentator. Elliot, and a Forest fan, of course. How are you, mate? Good to see you back on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for getting me back on. I'm glad the season's over, to be honest with you. Things have died down a little bit. Things are a little bit less hectic now in the world of Forest, but I'm sure that won't last for too much longer.
I was going to say it's been quite a few weeks. The club will put some statement out this week or something to make it all interesting. Also joined by Sam, Tricky Tees for the T-shirt business. Sam, how are you? And I guess, how's the T-shirt business going? Are you getting ready to do Euro prints?
Yeah, I'm all good, thanks, mate. I've done a little print out at the moment, and I posted that on my Instagram. So if you want to go check that out, it's on my Instagram now live. But yeah, no, it's going all well. Hoping to be down at the new fan park in the start of the new season to hopefully be selling some t-shirts in person. So keep an eye out for that, and yeah, we'll see what happens with it.
Nice one, good stuff. Yeah. Watch that fan pot. There's a dodgy presenter there. I don't really like him. Right, let's get into some Forest questions. And we'll start with one that came to us on Twitter. And to be honest, it was asked by more than one person. And it's a question that seems to be almost dominating Forest talk at the minute. Who would you rather sell, Murillo or Morgan Gibbs-White? Obviously, if Forest have to sell one, which is likely. Elliot, let's start with you. No pressure.
Well, obviously, in an ideal world, we'd sell neither, but we are obviously going to have to sell one of them to sort of keep in line with PSR and just balance the books, really. I'd be going for Murillo, personally. I don't think we can replace Murillo at all. However, I think it would be easier for us to get a defender in than someone that does what Morgan Gibbs-White does, not just in his goals and assists, but everything else he does on the pitch, from picking the ball up, back in a defensive midfield area and driving forward. I think to try and find someone like that would be incredibly difficult. Whereas finding a suitable defender to put alongside Willy Bolly or Omar Bamadele, I think that would be a little bit easier to do. But if we're trying to look for a like-for-like Murillo replacement, I don't think we're going to find that, because we did strike gold with that.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously Murillo's been, such an excellent player, but you're right. I think I agree. I think with Morgan Gibbs-White, Forest almost build the team round him. I think he's that instrumental to the side, and he's almost that kind of captain leader mentality. And I think that he kind of shows that on and off the pitch. Sam, do you agree? You think that out of those two, you'd be selling Murillo?
Yeah, I'm pretty much going to echo what Elliot said there, to be honest. I think he's the one that's the most replaceable. Morgan's just kind of become that leader role in there as well. Obviously, his performances as well have been fantastic, but he always puts 100% in. And without him, I think we will struggle to replace a Gibbs-White more than we will struggle to replace a Murillo. I think we've got some decent options at centre-back, I think, already in the squad that have obviously missed out this season just because of how good Murillo's been. I think obviously think back to how good Nick Carte has been before he got he had a few injuries, didn't he? But he came in and everyone kind of, as soon as you saw him, you're thinking, he's going to be a rock steady centre back for Forest for some time. And then obviously Murillo came in and nabbed his shirt. But I think he's the one that is going to be more likely to go. And obviously I think we'll end up getting more money for him as well, just because of his age.
And there's a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions about signings, and obviously this 30th of June deadline, and the Premier League are actually set to vote on some other rules this week, so that could change about how much money you can basically spend, and it's all to do with PSR incredibly complex, as we all know. This comment from Keith: build a team around Murillo. He's the best player to have played for Forest in decades. And Keith also says, oh, and I meant to add, put him in the midfield. That's not a bad point. In fact, we've got a question about Murillo and midfielders in a minute, so I'll get on to that. We'll stay on this, though, because we've got a live question from Lee, who says, who do you think we will end up selling this summer if the news is true? Need to sell. I think Alanga is the most realistic to go. Unfortunately, that's a bit of an interesting one, isn't it, Sam? Because I think Forest obviously will have to sell, and we announced the retain list yesterday. But it's going to be the case of, sadly, I probably imagine more than one player, and maybe if that's someone, Callum Hudson-Odoi's been heavily linked to, hasn't he?
Yeah, we've seen Hudson-Odoi obviously being linked. I know Tottenham were sniffing around. I think they need to just get lost and find some other club to raid. Yeah. I can't imagine it'd be Alanga, to be honest. I think he's been really good for us, and I think he's one of those players that we need to keep on the books, and we didn't pay too much for him, and I think it'd be a bit of a silly decision to kind of sell Alanga. So I also don't think we'll actually get that much for him in today's market, because of the kind of the inconsistency he's shown this season. I think he was good at the start of the season. He's kind of dropped off a little bit in form, but I think watching him week in, week out, he is so dangerous and he's got bags of potential. So I'd be really surprised if we let go of Alanga. And I can understand the interest in Hudson-Odoi. Around the way he finished the season, he really started showing that class that everyone knew he had when he first came through at Chelsea. So I can understand that interest, but again, he's another one that I think it'd be silly to sell, especially because I'm pretty sure there's a pretty big sell-on clause for Chelsea on his contract. So getting rid of him would maybe not have much of an impact on our PSR standings. So hopefully that's avoided.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to ask Elliot kind of more on the signing, but want to come on to this question that was from the Forest Ohio Facebook group, which is a good supporters group overseas. And the question was, assuming he isn't sold, thoughts on moving Murillo up to a more central defensive midfielder role that would allow him more attacking freedom? It's an interesting question, that, and you'd have never thought it'd probably been asked a few months ago, at least when we signed Murillo as a natural central defender. But it's not a bad shout, is it, given his almost pace and his enthusiasm of getting up the field?
I'm all for it, to be honest. I mentioned it a few months back to a few members of my family who didn't take the news particularly well of me wanting to move Murillo out of centre-back. But him being the way he is, like you say, he likes to drive forward, but also I feel from set-piece situations, he doesn't, and obviously he's young and he still has his time, and I want to be careful with how I say this, but he doesn't seem to read those aerial situations as well as a traditional centre-back would, for example. Maybe someone like Omar-Bamadele, who's the same age as him, but he seems to deal with those set-piece and aerial situations a little bit better. So if you put Murillo into midfield, you sort of take away the pressure on him having to marginalise that defence a little bit more. So if you, like I say, put him to that midfield, you allow him to roam forward a little bit more, and he can have that Brazilian freedom, perhaps, that maybe he'd like to use a little bit more. Whereas when he plays centre-back, he has to be a little bit more rigid. He has to stay in line a little bit more compared to, maybe how he'd like to play. But like you say, it's an interesting one. And I think, let's say he did stick around, I think that'd be one definitely to play around with in pre-season.
Yeah. Do you agree there, Sam? You think maybe kind of moving Murillo actually up would be a good shout?
No, you could play him anywhere. Doesn't matter. He could do a job absolutely anywhere. I'd have been all for him going up front, to be honest with you. So he's one of those players that he can play anywhere, can't he? So yeah, I think it's definitely an option to look at. But yeah, to be honest, I can't see a world where we keep him this transfer window, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll see. Alex asks, is Jonjo Shelvey still our player? Because I've seen news in Turkey that they want to buy him. It's a bit of an odd one with Shelvey. The Guardian reported, I can remember back in January, Forest basically announced it as a loan deal to the Turkish club. And then Forest all of a sudden said, oh no, actually it's permanent a few months later. So it is permanent. He doesn't play for Forest anymore. Jonjo Shelvey is actually on a permanent deal. It was just announced originally as a loan deal. So there you go. Never a dull moment. And I was just going to come on to this point because I've seen a few questions actually asked about it, Elliot, and would love to know your thoughts on kind of where he goes. Obviously, Lewis O'Brien is still with Forest and missed the registration deadline, and there was kind of all that talk surrounding it. He ended up going to America after a deal fell through with Blackburn. Can you see him being part of Forest plans? Would you keep him almost for a bit of squad depth on the bench, or would you be tempted just to get rid to a championship club really, and obviously free up space?
I'd probably go with the latter, to be honest with you, Max. I think when we first signed him, as we've all really discussed in the past, he was sort of the one we were more excited about over Harry Toffolo, fantastic player. And we thought he'd really suit our system, but things just haven't worked out for him. And I feel like we've got to move forward as a team now and as a club. And unfortunately, we have to leave players behind. And he's just one of those. We've seen Scott McKenna leave yesterday, or being announced to be leaving the club. And I think O'Brien's another one of those players that sadly just isn't Premier League quality, or at least Premier League quality enough for where Forest should be aiming for. We shouldn't be aiming for another season of relegation trouble. We need to be pushing on now. So we need to be aiming for players that can play in the Premier League week in, week out. And O'Brien is one that, like you say, he's played in the MLS a little bit recently, in the Championship. I don't feel like he would be able to come into our team and play 10 games in a row in the Premier League and help us on, a 4 or 5 game unbeaten streak, for example. So I feel, let's try and get 5 or 6 mil out of him and ship him on, really.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and probably agree. Which brings us quite nicely onto the question you're talking there about expectations for Forest next season. This one on Twitter again asked a few times. What's the expectation for Forest next year? Where do you think Forest will finish? Sam, let's come to you first. Do you expect Forest to push on, and you think let's not have a relegation scrap again, and all the anxiety around that?
Yeah, I mean that's the real goal, isn't it? Is to progress every season. I don't think I can take another relegation scrap with whoever comes up. Probably Leicester. It'll be a relegation scrap with us and Leicester, won't it? Probably next season. No, I don't think I can take that. So hopefully we're progressing a bit more at the table, and we're aiming a bit higher. I think the core of the squad, obviously, based on us keeping that core, I think the core of the squad is really good, and it shouldn't be down there. I think that's just been there's been, obviously, we spoke about it so many times this season about the different circumstances that have happened this season. But if we get a more stable season with less craziness, and that squad has the potential to be pushing up higher towards that middle of the table sort of area. So I think that's what we probably should expect. And if we don't get that and we're in another relegation scrap, then something's probably gone wrong again this summer.
If you had to put a position, if you had to pick a position in the table, Sam, what would it be? I'm only asking you so I can clip it next season if we get Champions League or something.
To be honest, I think it'll probably be around 14th, 13th, 14th. I think that would be progress. And I think a lot of people will be saying, "Oh, let's aim higher," but it's something that's you've got to kind of steady the ship in the Premier League, and we need to get some consistency going with how we play as a team and get an identity. Because at the moment we're just an absolute shambles. We get every game as it comes. Something crazy is happening, and we need that stability. And I think having another season where we solidify our position in the Premier League, that's when we can really kick on and really kind of stamp our authority on the Premier League and get our kind of style of football out there.
I suppose it is such a difficult league, isn't it, Elliot? And as Sam mentions about Leicester and even Ipswich and obviously Southampton coming up, that will probably be, no disrespect to the 3 teams that went down, but probably tougher teams this year. And albeit Leicester will have a points deduction, which again adds into the mix of it all. But Forest do have to aim high next season. It looks like Nuno's going to be the manager. He's going to be the one to take the club forward. And as Sam says, we've got to build that stability now. We can't afford to be in that relegation mess again.
Yeah, I think Nuno staying's an interesting one. I've seen the fan base quite divided by that on Twitter, to be honest, on whether they, Forest should stick or twist. And like you say, the quality of teams coming up, it's a lot higher than last season, with the greatest respect to Sheffield United, Burnley and Luton. Ipswich will spend money. Southampton will spend money. They've already spent 20 million on securing Harwood Bellis on a permanent transfer. So Forest have got to be prepared for that. And I do agree with the respect of Forest need stability, but I also think Forest fans need to remember the quality of teams in the Premier League now. And the quality is improving year on year. And while Forest do have a good team, they need to sort of marginalise expectations, I feel, a little bit. So I'd agree 14th, 15th would be quite nice. Any more than that, brilliant. But I wouldn't expect us to all of a sudden take the league by storm next year. I do expect still some struggles to be had. And maybe that is slightly down to the manager as well, because I'm not entirely comfortable with Nuno staying. I wasn't blown away by his football. But yeah, I think it'll be an interesting season if Nuno is the one to take us forward, and perhaps how long it does last. But I don't want to go too doom and gloomy.
Yeah.
The season's nowhere near starting yet. The transfer window isn't even open yet. So
do you think we should, I'm pretty sure I've asked you this question before, Sam, but you think that Forest should keep Nuno?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we like you say, that's the stability there now. Upheaving the manager and changing the whole thing, it's just like a big reset button for me, and I just don't think it's needed. I think we've all kind of got that connection a little bit now with him, and we can kind of see. I mean, you can see from the stats that the football improved over him over Cooper. Like, as much as we love Cooper, the football did improve. We scored more goals, we conceded less. I know that the form maybe wasn't as good, but the stats did improve. So, and the football got better. We weren't just going to teams and getting hammered. We were competing in games. Like the amount of games that we lost narrowly against big teams. It was more entertaining to watch. So yeah, I'm all for keeping Nuno.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Cooper, because as we do this today, he's heavily in talks with Leicester. So I wouldn't be surprised if Steve Cooper ended up as the next Leicester manager, which will make it a little bit interesting, to say the least. Let's look at signings, and we've had a few questions about the transfer window and everything like that. Who is your number one target for next year? I'll kick it off and say that I think Forest should go and raid Leeds United. I think Forest should go and get Willie Gnonto. I think he'd be excellent in the Forest side. If I had to pick one player, Elliot, who would you be picking? I mean, I guess this is a realistic signing, not just going to, go and say Haaland.
In an ideal world, I'd quite like us to go for Sammy Smodics. I feel like that's quite an obvious one to say, but there's a reason for that being an obvious one to say. Scoring that many goals for a team that nearly went down is remarkable. Whether he stays there or leaves, I'm not too sure. But I'm a big fan of Forest and other clubs looking down the leagues and looking at the Championship, especially now because it's such a competitive league. Like you say, with Leeds United potentially being there to raid. So I'd go for Sammy Smodics, and maybe as an outside shot, Gabriel Sara from Norwich as a potential maybe backup to Morgan Gibbs-White. But yeah, those would be my two.
Good players. Sam, who would you go for? And I suppose Elliot kind of makes an interesting point there about actually looking down the leagues, because at the end of the day, there is so much competition in the market now, and to get Premier League proven players, it's so difficult. So to almost look down and get Championship proven players, that's maybe almost the option going forward that the club will look at in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good strategy, I think. And to be honest, my answer would have been Sammy Smodics as well, but that's probably reliant on. Well, maybe he plays. He obviously scores a lot of goals, but I know that he plays that more of a 10 role, doesn't he? Where Morgan would normally play. So if Morgan was to leave, then he'd be the absolute first name I'd go for. And then apart from that, I mean, this might segue on to another question, Max, but I'd probably bring in Brice Samba if he's available.
It does bring me very nicely onto the next question. Well, it wasn't really a question; it was more of a point that I was actually going to say about Forest and the goalkeeper situation, because Danny Taylor reported in The Athletic, as he brilliantly does all the time, and he said that Matt Turner will likely go, or Vlachodimios. So does that, or even both of them? So there's that need for a number two if Matt Sells is going to be the preferred option. Sam, do you think that we should look at Brice Samba, or not just Brice Samba? When you look at even the number one situation, are you confident with Matt Sells, almost him being Forest's first choice next season, or would you be looking at another first choice and then having Sells as the number two, or do you think that's slightly unfair on him?
It's difficult with Sells. I think to be honest, all you have to do as a Forest keeper in that position is come in and just not make a shed load of mistakes, and you'll look 10 times better than the other options. And he did that. To be fair to him, he came in and he was very steady. He wasn't anything amazing. He was just a steady goalkeeper, which maybe some would argue is exactly what you want from a goalkeeper. Nothing too too flamboyant. And he was just steady and made some decent saves. I mean, he won Save of the Month in the Premier League a few times, didn't he? So some good saves. But to be honest, it's just the whole romance around Brice Samba. I would absolutely love it if the club announced something, just like a photo of the water bottle, or just some great media content on social media about Samba being a bit of a house. That would be amazing for me. But I know that RC Lens have got to sell, haven't they? I think they're in a bit of a sticky situation with finances. And I think Samba was one of those that's been listed as someone that might be on the way out. So, I mean, it'd be amazing if he did, but to be honest, I can see him either going to a bigger European team, and maybe avoiding the Marinakis kind of mess, because I think that he left on not the greatest terms surrounding his contract. So I would absolutely love it, but I can't. My head says I can't see it.
Fun fact about Brice Samba and that water bottle. Apparently, it was actually Samba's idea. I once got talking to the Forest goalkeeper coach, and apparently it was actually Samba's idea to do that. So there you go. And a lot of keepers have done it since. I'm not saying that Samba was the first, but he was the first in a long time, and it was really funny how he just kept looking, didn't it? I'd always watched that video back on YouTube, and how actually someone found that and almost took it home. Someone has got that water bottle somewhere. It's probably worth a lot of money in it. And if someone's listening and does have it, then we welcome you to come on the podcast, and we'll chat all things Forest and Brice Samba. Elliot, is it an unrealistic option going for Samba? And would you be looking, if Forest don't go for him, would you be looking at somebody else as either a number one or number two to Sells?
I'd certainly be looking at a new goalkeeper, and personally, I would be going for a new number one as well, or at least some competition to Matt Sells. I think, like Sam said, just needed someone to come in and steady the ship. I mean, he was unremarkable, but that's all he needed to be. But I feel we need someone a little bit stronger, someone that's a little bit more comfortable with playing the ball out the back, and maybe his distribution's a little bit better. So that's certainly something I'll be looking at. Whether Brice Samba's the one, I don't know. I mean, it'd be a beautiful fairy tale, wouldn't it, if he came back? And like you both mentioned about sort of the way he left the club and the Marinakis potential circus, I don't know personally what the issue was, whether it was on the Marinakis side or whether it was on Steve Cooper or maybe Dane Murphy's side. And obviously, some of those aren't at the club anymore, and some of them still are. So depending on who's still at the club that, swayed him to leave and wanted him to stay, perhaps, maybe that'd be nice. But he's a Champions League goalkeeper now, and he's a France goalkeeper now. He's in the Euro squad. So as much as I think it'd be great if we could go for him, I do think he'll have better suitors, be that in France or further afield. But if there's an opportunity there and Forest don't go for it, they're missing a trick.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Next question, which was asked from Liam on Twitter. Do you see the Marinakas ownership staying and committing to the club in the next few years? Sam, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, I think they pretty much made their intentions quite clear. They're in it for the long run, which is fantastic. We can say what we want about the stadium situation, and while a lot of us may not agree, the intentions that they've got is very clear. They want to take Forest to the right to the top, which is exciting for all of us, and we should be excited by that. So I think they're really committed, and they're going on this kind of path for success now. Obviously, they've had Olympiacos had that European success, which is the first time I think a Greek club's ever won anything in Europe. And I'm sure they're absolutely hungry for more and hungry to do it at Forest as well. So they'll be here for the long term.
Yeah, one thing I will say about the Marinakas ownership and a lot of the mainstream media, obviously, have done interviews with Marinakas or been very critical of him at times. And I will say that I think Forest have got an incredibly ambitious owner, and albeit, they've made mistakes and they've admitted that they've made mistakes. Most football club owners do. I mean, let's look at Everton or a team like that. But I think for Forest and the Marinakas ownership, if they can get things right this season, we can continue to build. And as you say, Sam, there about them almost outlining their intentions, they are here for the long run, and you can't fault their ambition, because they have been ambitious, really. Look, the season ticket prices was disappointing, but whether that was fully Marinakas, it's one of those questions that remains unanswered. So we'll see. But for me, I think I can see them being here for the next few years. Can you, Elliot?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. I'm not entirely against it, to be honest. It's taken them a long time with Olympiacos, but they finally won a European trophy. And maybe in 10 to 15 years, maybe it's dreamy thinking, but maybe that could be us. But that's what the owners will be thinking. That'll be absolutely in Marinakis' mind, is that he wants to get Forest into Europe. And why not? If that's the kind of owner that we've got, yes, there are other issues, such as the stadium, for example, and I am absolutely against leaving the City Ground. I don't want to leave there. However, if we've got an owner that's got such drive and commitment and passion, not just for Forest, but for football overall, I think they're really difficult to come by. We've seen what's happened with clubs like Reading, with clubs like Derby in recent years, and that could be us if we're not careful. So if we've got an owner that's happy to pump in money week in, week out, and try and push us on to be the best football club we can be, I'm all for it. And like you've both said, he's outlined his commitment to the club. So yeah, I can't see him selling up anytime soon, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I went to Greece on holiday a few years ago, and I can remember them just singing Marinakis' praises, and he has big involvement with the government there and the community and everything like that. He invests tons of money into different Greek islands to almost restructure them and regenerate them. And to be fair with him, we've seen recently he invested into the Forest netball team. So Forest have got their own netball team now, which will compete at a high level. So absolutely full credit there in terms of off the pitch and community stuff. Right, I think that does us for footballing questions. This one to close, which is quite a nice one. Your favourite ever Forest game from your time supporting the club? Sam, do you want to kick us off with this one?
Yeah, I've got a clear one in my mind. I think it might have even been my first ever away game. And it was the Man City FA Cup 3-0, where Nathan Tyson scored that wonder goal. And I remember it was my first vivid memory of an away day, and it was a packed out Forest end, 6,500 Forest fans making noise for the entire game. And we went over to Man City at the time. They just got their money, and the likes of Robinho were playing, and I think Joe Hart was in goal, and it was a star-studded squad. And we went there and we absolutely demolished them 3-0. And that one really sticks in my mind. And I absolutely love that day. I remember coming out of the Etihad and Man City fans coming up and saying, "Congratulations! You really deserved that win." And yeah, it's one of those days that'll always stick with me. That will.
Was Billy Davies manager then, Sam?
I think that was the time when he was just about to become manager, and I think he was sitting in the stands. I think before then.
So it was a caretaker manager.
It was a caretaker manager in at the time. I'm not sure. I can't remember who it was. It might be Frank Barlow, but it was a great day. And then a young Joe Garner scored right in front of the Forest fans near the end, just to wrap it all off. And it was sent the limbs going in the away end. It was great.
Yeah, very nice. If only Forest could recreate that this season away at City. A bit more of a challenge, eh? Elliot, what about you?
I was going to go with an away game as well, but I'll change things up. I'll go for a home game. A couple went through my mind, like the Notts County 3-3 draw, which was a crazy one. But I'll go for when Forest beat Arsenal 4-2 in the Cup as well. A little bit of Cup magic. I was on the commentary that day with a good friend of mine, Steve Corrie. And our reactions when Eric Lehigh scored, not his first one, or the header, the sort of shin flick into the top corner. I've never witnessed sort of home limbs like it, and just reactions around us in the press area, because nobody could quite believe what was happening. And yeah, it's just, that was a proper magical day. I think again we had a caretaker manager then, didn't we? I think it was
Gary
Brazil. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, maybe it's a thing with Forest caretaker managers in the FA Cup third round. But yeah, it was a proper special day. What about yourself, Max? If I can ask.
Of course. I was thinking I was going to say Wembley, but then it's too obvious, and it's almost too generic answer. I'd probably go.
The game was rubbish.
Yeah, it was. It was an awful game, wasn't it? It was Huddersfield should have had 3 penalties, and Forest got lucky with a deflection. I think the Sheffield United playoff second leg. I think we're talking about Samba in this podcast. I think that was just an unbelievable day. And then I'd also say this year when we beat Man U 2-1, it was it New Year's? Yeah, it was around the January time, wasn't it? I lose track of the season, but it was just a great day, especially living up in Manchester. Got the train back the next morning and wore my Forest shirt with pride whilst walking around Old Trafford, as I live very close there. So yeah, it was a good day, very, very good day. Right, I think that does us nicely. Thank you for all the questions, Elliot. Thank you very much, and you're off to America soon, aren't you, mate? So best of luck.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. Thanks for that, Max. Yes, I'm off to America, but I'll still be keeping an eye on Forest, and hopefully I'll be joining a few USA supporters groups while I'm over there as well.
Yeah, we've got. You was going to say you can go and see Mark over in the States. We've got plenty of people that join us on the podcast overseas. Sam, thank you. Do you want to plug the Tricky Teas business before we go?
Yeah, sure. Check me out on Instagram, Tricky Teas. Just have a look, have a check on Instagram, and if you like what you see, just give me a follow. It's always appreciated. And then, like I said, I'll probably be down the fan park as well, maybe a bit over summer, and maybe at the start of the season. So look out for me and Max, and say hello, and yeah, we'll see you at the start of next season.
Yes, very, very good. It'll come round quick, won't it? Quick shameless plug from me. I am running the half marathon in October, so I've kindly asked the team at Garibaldi Red to shove the link in the description to our Just Giving page. I'm running it with my brother, who is a Ryan Yates lookalike. So if you want to look at my brother, you can probably tell the similarities between him and Yates. We're running it for Footprints, the charity in Nottingham, and we've had the Footprints chairman Rob on before. You can scroll back and see the episode from a few weeks ago. Would highly recommend you listen to it, and he talks about the charity and the fantastic work they do for children in Nottingham. So if you can, any donations would be greatly appreciated. It's actually Sunday the 13th of October, so hopefully Forest are away at City or United the day before, because then we can get a Forest contingency up there trying to cheer me on as I'm dying from 5 minutes from the finish line, something like that. I need to get training. If you can, any donations would be greatly appreciated. And then next week we've got a bit of a special episode coming out. I pre-recorded this morning a great episode with Ben Dobson, who is an author, and he's just written a brand new book called 3 Footballing Legends, which is about Brian Clough and Bobby Robson and a few other managers. And he goes into detail about Brian Clough and the stories there. He spent time with John McGovern writing it. So we've got an interview with him coming out next week, pre-recorded, which is a great listen. So be sure to tune into that. Other than that, that does us nicely. Sam, Elliot, thank you as always. We will see you next time. Give us a like, share and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us across Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We will see you very soon. Come on, you Reds.